The invitation arrived on a Tuesday, its gold-embossed lettering gleaming mockingly in the afternoon sun. Marcus Wright and Rebecca Collins request the honor of your presence. I almost laughed at the irony. 20 years after walking out of my life, my ex-husband was getting married again. And somehow, through some cosmic joke, I've been invited. I'm Diana Matthews, but 20 years ago I was Diana Wright, wife to Marcus Wright and mother to our son James. Or at least I was, until Marcus orchestrated the greatest betrayal imaginable. The memories of that day still haunt me. I was at work when I got the call. There had been an accident at James's school. By the time I arrived at the hospital, Marcus was already there, his face grave as he told me our 6-year-old son hadn't made it. I collapsed, my world shattering into a million pieces. The following weeks were a blur of grief and confusion. Marcus handled everything. The funeral arrangements, the paperwork, even the life insurance claim. I was too devastated to question anything, too broken to notice the inconsistencies that should have raised red flags. It wasn't until 6 months later that I discovered the truth. A chance encounter at a grocery store changed everything. I was standing in the checkout line when I overheard 2 women talking. Did you see Rebecca's Facebook post from Paris? She and that Marcus guy look so happy together. And that little boy of his is adorable. My heart stopped. I knew Rebecca. She was Marcus's colleague from work. But Paris? A little boy. With trembling hands, I pulled out my phone and searched for Rebecca Collins on Facebook. Her profile was public, and there they were, Marcus, Rebecca, and a little boy who looked exactly like my James. The timestamps on the photos showed they'd been taken just weeks after James' death. My son wasn't dead. Marcus had stolen him, faked his death, and started a new life with his mistress. The revelation nearly destroyed me all over again. But this time, instead of collapsing into grief, I felt something else. Rage. Pure, white-hot rage that burned away the fog of depression I'd been living in. I immediately hired a private investigator, but Marcus had covered his tracks well. He and Rebecca had moved to Europe, using his dual citizenship to establish a new life. The death certificate, the funeral, everything had been carefully orchestrated to make it appear that James had died in that accident. For years, I followed their lives from afar, watching through social media as my son grew up calling another woman Mom. I saw birthdays, school events, family vacations, all the moments that should have been mine. But I couldn't do anything without risking Marcus disappearing with James again. So I waited. I built a new life for myself, channeling my pain into success. I went back to school, earned my law degree, and became a specialist in international family law. The irony wasn't lost on me. Every case I took on was driven by the knowledge that somewhere out there, my son was growing up without knowing the truth. Now, 20 years later, here was this invitation. Marcus and Rebecca were returning to the States for their wedding, a lavish affair to celebrate their love story. But what they didn't know was that I'd never stopped searching, never stopped gathering evidence. 2 months ago, my private investigator finally found something, proof of the fraud, documented evidence of how Marcus had faked James's death. More importantly, he found James himself, now 26 and working as an architect in London. I remember staring at his photo for hours. He had my eyes and Marcus's smile. But he was his own person now, shaped by a life I hadn't been part of. With shaking hands, I'd written him a letter, telling him everything. I didn't expect a response, but 3 days later, my phone rang. Is it true? His voice was deep, controlled, but I could hear the tremor in it. Did he really fake my death? Yes, I whispered, tears streaming down my face. I've spent 20 years trying to find you. The silence that followed felt eternal. Then, I want to meet you, and I want to make him pay for what he did to us. Now, as I hold this wedding invitation, I think about the plan James and I have crafted. Marcus thinks he's about to have his perfect day, celebrating his love story with the woman he left me for. He has no idea that his past is about to catch up with him. I pick up my phone and text James. The invitation arrived. Are you ready? His response comes quickly. Ready, Mom. See you in 2 weeks. I smile, running my finger over the embossed lettering one more time. Marcus Wright and Rebecca Collins request the honor of your presence. Oh, it will be my honor indeed. The day I learned Marcus had stolen our son, I died inside. But now, 20 years later, I'm about to show him exactly what that kind of death feels like. And this time, there won't be any coming back from it. The next 2 weeks passed in a blur of preparation and anticipation. James flew in from London, and seeing him in person for the first time in 20 years nearly brought me to my knees. We spent hours talking, filling in the gaps of 2 decades lost. I always felt something was off. James told me one evening as we sat in my living room, photos spread out between us. "Dad, Marcus, he would get weird whenever I asked about you. Rebecca tried to convince me you died when I was little, but things didn't add up." I handed him a photo of his 6th birthday party, the last one we'd celebrated together. "This was right before he took you. You wanted a Spider-Man cake, but I accidentally ordered Batman. You cried for 10 minutes straight." James laughed. Then his expression turned serious. "I remember that day. Vaguely. I remember someone singing. Was that you?" "Yes," I whispered, fighting back tears. "I sang the birthday song off-key on purpose because it always made you giggle." He stared at the photo for a long moment. "All these years I thought those memories were dreams or my imagination. Rebecca would tell me I was confused, that she'd always been my mother. But I knew, somewhere deep down, that something wasn't right." The pain in his voice made my heart ache. Marcus hadn't just stolen my son. He'd stolen James's truth, his history, his connection to who he really was. As the wedding day approached, we fine-tuned our plan. The ceremony was to be held at St. Patrick's Cathedral, a grand affair with over 300 guests. Marcus had done well for himself in Europe, building a successful investment firm. The wedding would be his crowning achievement, a celebration of the life he built on the ruins of the one he destroyed. The night before the wedding, I couldn't sleep. I stood at my window, watching the city lights flicker in the distance. 20 years ago, I'd been a broken woman, destroyed by what I thought was the death of my child. Now I was stronger, wiser, and finally ready to reclaim what was stolen from me. My phone buzzed with a text from Rebecca's sister, Emma. She'd been my unexpected ally in all this. When I'd reached out to her with the evidence of Marcus's fraud, she'd been horrified. She'd always had suspicions about her sister's sudden relationship with Marcus and their quick move to Europe. But Rebecca had shut down any questions. "Everything's set." Emma's text read. "The video presentation is loaded into the system. They have no idea." I smiled, thinking about the surprise we had planned. Marcus and Rebecca had asked Emma to put together a video montage of their love story to play during the reception. Instead, she created something very different, a carefully compiled presentation of evidence showing exactly how Marcus had faked James's death, including documents, photographs, and damning emails we'd uncovered. The next morning dawned bright and clear. I took extra care getting ready, choosing a deep blue dress that made me look elegant but understated. I wasn't there to steal attention, at least not yet. James met me at my apartment, looking handsome in his tailored suit. The resemblance to his father was striking, but there was a kindness in his eyes that Marcus had never possessed. "Ready?" he asked, offering his arm. I took a deep breath, steadying myself. Ready. The drive to the cathedral was quiet, both of us lost in our thoughts. As we pulled up, I could see guests streaming in, all dressed in their finest. Marcus had spared no expense. There were flowers everywhere, a red carpet leading up the steps, and uniformed attendants directing traffic. We waited in the car until most of the guests were seated. Through the cathedral's open doors, I could see Marcus standing at the altar, beaming with pride. He looked older but still handsome, his dark hair now streaked with silver. Rebecca stood with her bridesmaids, radiant in her designer gown, completely unaware that her perfect day was about to implode. "Mom," James said softly, touching my hand. "Are you sure about this? We could still walk away." I turned to look at him, this wonderful young man who had been ripped away from me. "No," I said firmly. "He needs to face what he did." "They both do. You deserve better than a life built on lies." He nodded, squeezing my hand. "Then let's do this." We stepped out of the car just as the wedding march began to play. The timing was perfect. All eyes would be on Rebecca as she walked down the aisle. No one would notice us slipping in through the side door. Emma met us as planned, ushering us to our designated seats near the middle of the cathedral. From here, we had a clear view of Marcus's face as he watched his bride approach. He was smiling, tears in his eyes, probably thinking about how perfectly his life had turned out. I felt a fierce satisfaction knowing that smile was about to be wiped off his face. As Rebecca reached the altar and the priest began to speak, I caught Emma's eye. She gave an almost imperceptible nod. Everything was ready. The moment of truth was approaching, and 20 years of waiting were about to pay off. Marcus had no idea that his perfect wedding day was about to become his worst nightmare. Just as the priest asked if anyone had any reason why these two should not be wed, I stood up. The movement caught Marcus's eye, and for a moment, he just stared, his face going pale as recognition dawned. Then his gaze shifted to James, and I watched as every drop of blood drained from his face. It was time for Marcus Wright to learn that some deaths aren't permanent and some sins can't be buried forever. I object, I said, my voice ringing clear through the cathedral. The gasps from the guests created a wave of whispers that washed through the space. Marcus gripped the altar, his knuckles white. Diana, he managed to choke out. What are you? Then his eyes locked on James again, and he stopped breathing altogether. Rebecca turned, confusion written across her face until she saw James. The bouquet slipped from her hands, hitting the floor with a soft thud. No, she whispered. It's impossible. James stood beside me, tall and composed. Hello, Dad, he said, his voice steady. Or should I say Marcus? Since you're clearly not the father you pretended to be. The priest looked between us, completely lost. I'm sorry, what's happening here? What's happening, I said, stepping into the aisle, is the exposure of a 20-year fraud. Marcus Wright didn't just leave his wife, he faked his son's death and stole him away to start a new life. The murmurs in the crowd grew louder. I could see phones being pulled out, people recording what was quickly becoming the scandal of the year. Emma, I called out, would you mind showing everyone what we found? Emma, standing by the audio-visual controls, pressed a button. The large screens that had been set up to show the wedding video flickered to life. Instead of romantic photos of Marcus and Rebecca, documents began to appear. The falsified death certificate, medical records that had been tampered with, emails between Marcus and his contacts arranging the elaborate scheme. This is ridiculous, Marcus sputtered, trying to maintain control. Diana, you're delusional. You need help. No, Dad, James cut in, his voice sharp. You're the one who needs help. I found the letters, the ones Mom wrote trying to find me. The ones you kept hidden all these years. Rebecca swayed slightly, her perfect makeup starting to run as tears formed. Marcus, what is he talking about? What letters? I pulled out my phone and played a recording. Marcus's voice from 20 years ago, speaking to the man who helped him fake the death certificate. The words echoed through the cathedral. Make sure it's airtight. His mother can never know he's alive. I'll transfer the rest of the money once we're safely out of the country. The silence that followed was deafening. All these years, James continued, moving closer to the altar. You told me my mother was dead. You made me believe I was crazy when I had memories of her. Do you have any idea what that did to me? Marcus's face had turned from white to gray. Son, I can explain. I'm not your son, James snapped. Not anymore. A father doesn't do what you did. A father doesn't steal a child from his mother and spend 20 years lying about it. Rebecca had backed away from Marcus, horror dawning on her face. You told me she abandoned him, she whispered. You said she didn't want him, but she signed away her rights. He lied to you too, Rebecca, I said, softening my tone slightly. He lied to everyone. And now it's time for the truth to come out. Emma stepped forward, holding up her phone. The police are on their way. They're very interested in the evidence of fraud we uncovered. Faking a death certificate, insurance fraud, kidnapping. Those are serious crimes, Marcus. The wedding guests were now standing, phones recording everything. I could already imagine the social media storm this would create. Marcus Wright, prominent investment banker, exposed as a fraud and kidnapper at his own wedding. Marcus made a sudden move toward the side door, but two men I'd hired, private security, stepped forward to block his path. Running away again, Marcus? I asked. That seems to be your specialty, but not this time. James moved to stand beside me, and I felt 20 years of pain starting to lift. We'd done it. We'd exposed the truth, and more importantly, we'd reclaimed our story. The police arrived minutes later, their sirens cutting through the chaos that had erupted in the cathedral. As they led Marcus away in handcuffs, I watched Rebecca sink into a pew, her wedding dress pulling around her like broken dreams. Mrs. Wright, one of the officers, approached me. We'll need you and your son to come down to the station to give formal statements." I nodded, then turned to James. "Are you okay?" He looked at the chaos around us, the shocked guests, the abandoned altar, the evidence of Marcus's crimes still displayed on the screens, and smiled slightly. "Yeah, Mom, for the first time in 20 years, I think I really am." Epilogue. Marcus Wright was sentenced to 15 years in prison for his crimes. The story made national headlines, leading to changes in how death certificates are verified and processed. Rebecca filed for an annulment and later testified against Marcus, claiming she had no knowledge of his elaborate scheme. James and I spent the next year rebuilding our relationship. We couldn't recover the 20 years that were stolen from us, but we could move forward together. He moved back to the States, taking a position at an architectural firm in a city to be closer to me. As for me, I finally felt free. The weight of 2 decades of searching, wondering, and grieving have lifted. I gotten my son back, and more importantly, I gotten justice. Sometimes late at night, I look at that wedding invitation that started it all, and I smile. Marcus thought he had orchestrated the perfect life, built on lies and stolen dreams. Instead, his wedding day became his downfall, and my greatest victory. They say revenge is a dish best served cold. But I think the best revenge is simply the truth finally brought to light after years of darkness. And sometimes that truth comes wrapped in a gold-embossed wedding invitation.